Hello everyone, Michael here for Tactica Imperialis with a 40k tactics video. Today we're going to be talking about the aggressive list. That is a list that is designed to rush an opponent down and generally will win the games very quickly or not win them at all. So I did a 40k tactics video a couple of weeks ago talking about control lists, and these are the types of lists that play the long game, generally don't start very well, but can really start to snowball out of control, assuming that they're played pretty well. Well, an aggro list, as I'm going to term it, is a bit less tactical. It's a bit more point and click. But there are a few things you have to do when playing aggressively that can change whether you win, whether you lose, whether you steamroll and run over your opponent, or whether you run out of steam, because an aggro list is not very sticky. It's a list that will kill things and kill it fast. It can't stick around during protracted firefights or long slog melees. So these are units, when you build your aggro list, that will have to be able to break an enemy in one go. They need to be units that can either blast an opponent away with one turn of shooting or psychic power, or that can go into an assault and carve a unit to pieces, either killing it outright or crippling it to the point where you can kill it in your turn and then have, or kill it in your opponent's turn and then have your turn free to go and do whatever mayhem ensues. So armies that are not suited to playing aggro lists are armies that are suited to playing control lists. So armies like Guard, Necrons, Tyranids to a degree are rather slow. Guard and Necrons especially are very, very slow and generally cannot rush you down. Unless you're playing mech vets or flying croissants spam Necrons, it's very hard to make a very fast list out of these sorts of games. So I think that rush armies need to be composed of fast moving, deadly, but probably fragile. I mean, if you can make them tanky, great, but generally fragile dudes. So Eldar, Dark Eldar especially, Tyranids, maybe, particularly if you're running Hormagaunts over Termagaunts and Gargoyles, etc. And possibly you could do it with Space Marines, but Blood Angels especially. Blood Angels are probably the best Space Marines to try and do it with. You could do it with Orcs, or you could, in theory, if you didn't want to do it as an assaulty type of list, you could do it with Tau. And I'll explain why later. So, as an aggressive player, your job is to win the game by the end of turn 3. Turn 4 at the latest, because once you get to turn 5, most of your models will probably be dead unless you found a way to keep them alive through some tricky nonsense shenanigans. So, when you're building it, think about units that will kill quickly. So, if you're playing Dark Eldar, this is probably going to sound very suboptimal, but you take Witches and maybe even Hecatrix Bloodbrides, if those units still exist, in Venoms and Raiders, which are very, very fast and very, very efficient in melee. You then pack in some anti-tank maneuverable units like Ravagers or Carbolites in Raiders with Dark Lances. And those sorts of units are there to make sure that the big pie plates and general AoE clearances aren't there. They're there to silence those AoEs to make sure that your fragile murder machines can just go in and, well, break the enemy. That's their job. You then might want a couple of resilient elements just in case the front attack breaks. So as a Dark Eldar player, you might run Grotesques or Racks contained within Venoms or Raiders, depending on unit size, that can come up with the Witches or behind the Witches. And if the Witches don't kill stuff or just end up bogging stuff down for a while, then the Grotesques and Racks can go in to swing the melee or to tank any damage from the units that survive it. So that's if you want to do it on a melee side, obviously. You might want to do it as a Tyranid player who plays very short range lists. So Gargoyles, who can do mass short range shooting to make up for the fact you don't have Termagaunts. Hormagaunts to do your actual fast moving bullet shield, potentially deadly murder machines. And then you have a few flying monstrous creatures and a few really tough tanky units, preferably like Tervigons, who can just spawn out more stuff. Or maybe Biovores, who can create spore mines and be absolutely terrifying. Or some fast-moving Pyrovores even to clear out entrenched enemies. It does all sound suboptimal. I'm talking about a lot of units that most players don't run. I know if I told Warwick I want you to make a list that includes Pyrovores, Hormagaunts over Termagaunts, Gargoyles, and such, he would laugh at me and say, what the heck is this list? This is not going to win. And it's not. In the typical long slog 40k game, it will lose. It's designed to do that. It's designed to break the enemy or die. And you have to accept that. So these decks that... I'm sorry, I keep calling them decks because it's a Hearthstone concept that I have brought over to 40k. Sorry about that. So if I call it a deck, assume I mean a list, because I do. So these sorts of aggressive lists need to be quick, deadly, and able to silence any threat that comes their way. So, I've talked about a few units you want to put in. Then you need to think about your deployment. Now, obviously, as an aggro player, you want first turn. Every single time you want first turn. Because if you have first turn, you can get the drop on your opponent. Particularly if you're running an army like Dark Eldar or Tyranids, you can move very quickly. You can get up the board. Pause if I made anybody jump. You can get up the board really, really quickly and start applying pressure across multiple fronts. If you have 3 squads of witches, 2 squads of Racks, and a Hecatrix Bloodspite squad with Lilith, and you put them all in raiders, and you rush them up the board all at once, your opponent is going to go, oh my god, I can't kill everything. Particularly if you've given them Flicker Fields, Night Shields, I think it's Flicker Fields, at least it was Flicker Fields, to give out invulns or something that gives out cover saves. And all of a sudden, your opponent has got no way of dealing with all of that. No way is he going to deal with it. He's got to target select and go, all right, I want that one dead and I want that one dead. Oh, wait, look, you've left half of them alive. Here you go. They're all on top of you and they're all assaulting you. Have a nice day. And that's what the aggro list does beautifully. It presents so many targets that unless you've got massive board clearances like pie plates and flamers everywhere, you're just not going to kill everything. And that aggro list will be so far up in your face that it will just go, thank you very much, bang, dead. That's what an aggro list does. It kills you quickly. So your deployment is obviously get as far forward as possible. No point unless you're playing sniper units like Carbolites with Dart Lances or broadside battle suits maybe, or something tanky to hide at the back. Everything else needs to be up and ready to rush up and do damage. Because otherwise, because all the time it's rushing up, it's not doing damage unless it's Tau Fire Warriors walking up the board. So you have to be quick about it, and that means deploying forward. Try and utilize cover where you can, but bear in mind if you're foot slogging especially, cover will slow you down. So as much as it might be great to keep them alive, I think it's almost better sometimes to sacrifice a few guys or even a couple of units to get up the board further, take them as bait, so as your other units that maybe are using cover can get up quickly because they can run to catch up, if that makes sense. And then once you start playing, obviously your job is to apply as much pressure to the face as possible. Scare your opponent. Don't make him think, okay, I'm a little bit worried about this unit getting killed, so I'm going to hide it round here, and then I'm going to move these 4 inches. No, wrong tactic. Everything goes up. Everything puts the pressure on, because that way your opponent is suddenly presented with a wall of stuff that's way, way too close for comfort, and there's no way he's going to kill it all. Even if he's running Tau or Imperial Guard, he's not going to kill everything. And that's the beauty of the tactic. So, if you end up getting to turn 2 is when you want to start launching your assaults. Try and do your assaulting one unit with multiple units. So, if there's a key unit you need to neutralize, but it has a really good Overwatch, or it's Tau, or it's both, it's got good Overwatch and it's Tau, then you want to be charging into one unit at a time. And the reason for that is because you can then crush that unit entirely. Or if it's a big unit, a la Guard Conscript Blobs with a Priest, they can be really, really sticky. And because you're going to have a bucket load of attacks from a bucket load of dudes, you're going to be doing a lot of damage and wiping it out probably in your opponent's turn. Particularly if you can challenge out the Priest, kill him, or the Commissar, kill him, and then suddenly that unit is going to break. Run away, you can sweeping advance it. It's now your turn again, and you can say, right, what do I want to kill next? That. Bang, bang, bang. And just keep knocking over units in a domino effect. At the end of turn 2, you should have started launching assaults. Preferably going in all in one go, because that way only one unit has to eat Overwatch. Bear that in mind. Eating Overwatch is not fun on fragile dudes. Playing Guard has taught me this. Playing Dark Eldar once has taught me this. Fragile dudes hate Overwatch. So you want to try and mitigate how many units actually have to eat it. Better 1 than 3. So assaulting all in one place might sound counterproductive, but it crushes that unit. And you are then free to, deal with another one, and another one, and another one. At the end of turn 2, everything that isn't in assault should be within 18 inches. Preferably within 12, that way an assault or a burst of rapid fire is on. And your opponent suddenly has this really beatstick combat unit that he needs to bog down for the rest of the game, otherwise it's just going to sweep everything. A la Terminators with lightning claws or Death Company dreadnoughts. He needs to kill them really, 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 really quickly. But he can't, because if he ignores it and mobs in onto that big combat beatstick, he's suddenly stuck with a huge battle line that's about to go and chop. Get what I mean? It's all about pressure. You never give your opponent a moment's rest. At the end of turn 3, your battle plan should be coming to its peak. You should be now winning. At this point, this is where you should be winning the game. You should be getting close to either tabling your opponent or putting him into a position where in tactical objective games, he can't win. Or in games with the relic, he's not going to catch the relic. Flyers can come in and play great diversionary units, coming in, strafing attacks, bombing runs, and can do a lot of work for you. At the end of turn 3, you'll probably have won the game. Your opponent will be in such a position that he can't come back. The absolute latest you want to be in that position is the end of your turn 4. Because if at the end of your turn 4, his turn 4, he's able to stabilize and have your units whittled away, he might just catch you. Except in games like the Relic, where you've run off with the objective, generally he might catch you. So you want to be in a position where he won't come back, and which means you need to deliver hammer blow after hammer blow. If you do get to turn 5, because the game obviously can't end on turn 4, you then have to switch your tactic from being all out rush to consolidating what you have. If you are close to tabling, go for the kill. Fine. But make sure that you are picking up objectives where you can. So landing on objectives or securing tactical objectives. Whatever you've got to do it. Because just in case your opponent is able to snatch a really good card draw and pull out some really nice objectives and turn it a bit, you still want to be building those points. So, and if your opponent is able to stabilize, you've really got to switch to playing the control list that I talked about earlier, where you can take every objective on the board or protect what's running away with objectives or protect your home objective and then start closing the net. Treat the whole game like you're running with a massive net to try and catch the opponent's army in. On the first few turns, you're just trying to snare them down on the first 2 turns. And then you need to tighten the net over the next 2 turns to the point where it's dead. Or to a point where it's just trapped and it's not going to win. If that makes sense. Now, why did I mention Tau? I mentioned Tau as being a possible aggro list. Even though Tau is one of the most passive armies in the book, it's a gun line. Well, Tau have battle suits. Tau have battle suits everywhere, particularly if you have the Farsight Enclave, I'm going to call it Enclave, the Farsight Enclave expansion supplement thingy that allows you to take crisis suits as troops. In that scenario, Tau can be hyper aggressive. Huge crisis squads, jumping up the board, blasting things, then jumping into cover, then jumping out, blast, jumping into cover. They never assault, but they can be really, really aggressive. Piranhas can go weaving in and out of units for tank hunting. Stealth can be an almighty pain. And then, of course, you have 2 Riptide, 2 Riptides and a stealth suit to bulk out your elite section and say, right, kill us or lose. And then, of course, you have the Farsight Bomb if you want to run it. It's hilarious. And if you want to go with some heavy support, you might drop in some broadsides for some heavy fire support. So Battlesuit Tau is a very aggressive list and can be run in a manner that I've already talked about, using Deep Strike and Jumpsuit Jump to get around quickly, do massive damage, and then hide. So you might want to be holding units back, drop them in, boom, jump away. Typical Tau Tactica, really. So that's my thoughts on aggressive lists. It's a hard list to quite construct because you're having to use suboptimal units. Hecatrix Blood Brides absolutely annihilate stuff in combat, but they're very, very weak, if they still exist even. They might not. But Witches are the same problem, because they don't have an invul save outside of melee. Gargoyles and Hormagaunts over Termagaunts. I mean, fast Termagaunts, but just as fragile and smaller units. But Hormagaunts are really, really worse really inferior to Termagaunts because they don't have a shooting attack. but they're there as a bullet shield. And if you can keep them alive in some way, then all the better. And I might be asking you to run things like, I don't know, Kroot even. Kroot to run up the board and be dangerous. All these sorts of units sound really, really bad, but it's how you use them as part of this aggressive whole that can make them work. In terms of actually playing the game, it's simple. Rush, 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 and rush down until your opponent just can't take it anymore. Keep hitting and hitting and hitting until it breaks. You'll probably only have 3 turns before your opponent can stabilize and then kick your sorry butt into next week. But if you can do it quickly, you will win game after game after game, assuming you know how to get the most out of your precision sledgehammer. Yeah, precision sledgehammer is an oxymoron. But an aggro list is like a sledgehammer. It just goes bang and bricks the enemy army. But it does it by breaking things one core component at a time. So, big scary pie plate, bang. Big scary infantry blob that's going to unleash 1,000,000 shots, bang. And so on and so on. It breaks all the key links until things shatter. Control is the best counter to aggro. If you want to see why, it's quite simple. Control can withstand the aggression, meet the aggression in the wrong place, and then just slowly roll it over. Mid-range, even if it's quick out the blocks, just doesn't have that steady tempo that it can't maintain because it's having its elements broken up that control can still come back from, whereas mid-range can't, if you follow. So that's my thoughts on aggressive lists. If you found this video useful, or you run an aggro list, or you want to try one out, be sure to let me know in the comment section. If you want to use one, I'd be very interested to see how it goes. Yeah, that's all for this video. So thank you for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I will see you again.